In my previous video, I had talked about how Mount Everest is named after Sir George Everest, who had nothing to do with either discovering the mountain or leading the expedition which measured the height of the mountain, but still Mount Everest was named after him. Why it was named after Sir George Everest, who had nothing to do with anything about Mount Everest, has been explained in my previous video, where I categorically mentioned that Sir George Everest was not involved in mapping the height of Mount Everest, which raises the natural question that I should have answered ideally in the previous video. Who measured the height of Mount Everest? This is a fascinating story, and actually the height of Mount Everest was measured by someone from Bengal who probably never visited Mount Everest, not even the base camp. He just got data about the mountain from different sources, probably sat on his desk, used his extensive knowledge of trigonometry, spherical trigonometry to be exact, and was able to measure the height of Mount Everest without ever seeing it, almost to the exact decimal point. In this video, we will learn about Radhanath Shikdar and how he measured accurately the height of Mount Everest. So, Sir George Everest was the Surveyor General of India. He was involved in mapping the heights of several mountains, just not the mountain named after him. In 1831, Sir George Everest, in his capacity as the Surveyor General of India, was looking for a person who had specialized in spherical trigonometry. This person was required to be a part of the Great Trigonometric Survey. So John Tytler, the professor of mathematics at the Hindu College, which is now known as Presidency College in Calcutta, recommended his 18-year-old pupil Radhanath Shikdar. Radhanath Shikdar was a student of the Hindu College since 1824. He was one of the first two Indians to have read Isaac Newton's Principia, and by 1832 he had studied Euclid's Elements, Thomas Jefferson's Fluxion, and analytical geometry and astronomy by Windhouse. Taking inspiration from these prestigious papers, he devised a new method to draw a common tangent to two circles when he was just a teenager. That's Radhanath Shikdar for you. There was little doubt about the proficiency in mathematics, more specifically trigonometry, of Radhanath Shikdar, and he secured the job at the Great Trigonometric Survey on 19th December 1831. He was employed as a quote-unquote computer. Remember, this is 1831 when computing was done by genius mathematicians and not by a smartphone. What was his salary at the time? 30 rupees per month. 30 rupees per month. He worked alongside 7 other Bengali quote-unquote computers. These are human beings who were employed as computers. Radhanath Shikdar soon showed his superior skills in mathematics and became Sir George Everest's favorite colleague. This is Everest the person, not the mountain. So much so that Sir George Everest once stopped the transfer of Radhanath Shikdar to a different department. What was Radhanath Shikdar's job? His job was to carry geodetic surveys, that is, the study of the Earth's geometric shape orientation in space and gravitational field. He did not just use the established methods, but Radhanath Shikdar himself invented many of his own methods to accurately measure these factors. I've mentioned in the video previously about Mount Everest that Sir George Everest retired in 1843, 9 years before the discovery of Mount Everest. Mount Everest was discovered when Sir Andrew Scott Waugh was the Surveyor General of India. In 1851, Radhanath Shikdar was promoted to the position of Chief Computer and he was transferred to Calcutta. Here he was also a superintendent for the meteorological department. Colonel Waugh ordered Radhanath Shikdar to measure the height of Himalayan mountains. The brilliant mathematician Radhanath Shikdar had perhaps never seen Mount Everest, which was discovered in 1852. At that time, Kanchenjunga was considered to be the tallest in the world, but Radhanath Shikdar, through his calculations, understood that Kanchenjunga wasn't really taller than Mount Everest. Mount Everest at that time was labeled Peak 15. He compiled data about Peak 15 from 6 observations. Eventually, he came to the conclusion that Peak 15 was taller than Kanchenjunga. Consequently, Peak 15 was the tallest mountain peak in the world. Later on, Peak 15 was named after Sir George Everest, and this is the mountain we know today as Mount Everest. Although in Nepali language it is called Sagarmatha, in Tibetan language it is called Chomolungma. Now the interesting thing here is Radhanath Shikdar had calculated the height of Peak 15, now known as Mount Everest, at exactly 29,000 feet. In meters, 8,839 meters. But Andrew Waugh added an arbitrary 2 feet because he was afraid that Radhanath Shikdar's figures would be considered a rounded number rather than a meticulously done accurate measurement. Officially, the measurement was declared as per Andrew Waugh's wishes in March 1856, and this remained the height of Mount Everest till an Indian survey recalculated it to be 29,029 feet or 8,848 meters in 1955. So the height that Radhanath Shikdar calculated without ever visiting Mount Everest in the 1850s, more than 100 years later, was corrected by only 29 feet by people who had visited Mount Everest perhaps several times. That's the genius of Radhanath Shikdar. He could measure the height of the highest mountain peak almost accurately without ever visiting it. Technological advancements, data from thousands of climbers, and the discovery of different routes to the summit of Mount Everest all have led to a more accurate calculation of the height of Mount Everest, and it has also been noticed that the peak of Mount Everest grows at the rate of 4 millimeter every year, and its summit is slowly moving in a northeastwards direction each passing year. So I hope you liked this video where we paid homage to the astonishing work of the great mathematician Radhanath Shikdar. Radhanath Shikdar retired from service in 1862 and was later appointed as teacher of mathematics at the General Assembly's institution, which is now known as Scottish Church College.